Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. Joe Biden is in Ankara, the U.S. Vice President, for a charm offensive, you might call it. The day we've been talking about in part one of our discussion, that Turkish special forces, backed by U.S. air power, alongside Syrian rebels, have taken back a town that had been controlled by ISIS at the Syrian border. Also there to mend fences over Turkey's displeasure over the refusal to hand over Pennsylvania-based preacher Fetullah Gulen. President Erdogan accuses the cleric of instigating last month's coup attempt. There you see Biden in the company of the Turkish president, the U.S. vice president, offering his condolences over the coup. After earlier in the day, visiting Parliament. With us to talk about it, Fetullah Gulen, who teaches political science at Istanbul's Sehir University. Here in the studio, Emre Demir, editor of Zaman France. From Washington, from the Hudson Institute think tank, Michael Pregent. Also joining us for part two of our discussion, we'd like to welcome Syria Kurds, Member of Parliament for the opposition HDP party. Thank you for being with us. Now, we've heard we saw there the U.S. Vice President Joe Biden. Here's what he had to say when it came to Gulen earlier in the day. It was, of course, the issue he was pressed upon. Why hasn't the U.S. extradited him back to Turkey?
We are cooperating with Turkish authorities. Our legal experts are working right now with their Turkish counterparts on the production of and the evaluation of material and evidence that needs to be supplied to an American court to meet the requirements under our law and the extradition treaty to extradite Gulen. We have no interest whatsoever in protecting anyone who has done harm to an ally. None. But we need to meet the legal standard requirement under our law.
Fetullah Gulen, you agree with the Vice President there that, well, it's not up to Obama, it's up to the courts?
Well, I mean, it's an internal discussion within the U.S., but we have to understand that Turkish people are quite sensitive about this issue. And it was a bloody coup attempt, and there is a consensus among Turkish people that this is done by Gulen's network. And even many people in Turkey believe that there is some kind of American involvement, whether tacit or more clear kind of involvement.
And do you believe that?
And that's why Turkish public is well, it's, I mean, some people in Washington, D.C. may be aware of the coming of the coup. So I believe in that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that American government or some people from the government is directly involved in this. So that's and most people in Turkey also believe in this direction, and that's why there's Turkish people are very sensitive about this issue, and they say that, you know, America is our ally. Why are they protecting a terrorist, you know, that tried to have a coup attempt in Turkey? And people are having difficulty to understand, and especially the U.S. American authorities' response in the aftermath of coup. For example, John Kerry's response, Turkey may be taken out of NATO, or CENTCOM generals, and U.S.'s late response to or support to Turkey after this coup made it a little bit more sensitive for Turkish people. So I think this visit is very important, and it may help to get rid of these emotional issues, and it may bring Turkey and U.S. closer in this direction. But I think there is still a lot to be done at this moment.
Syria Kurds, do you agree with what you just heard, that the U.S. has played a murky role in the events that preceded and have followed that failed coup attempt last month?
I mean, that would be quite speculation because we don't really have the facts. But I can tell you that in general, in Turkey, there is the popular belief that the U.S. was somehow involved in the failed coup attempt. And the other thing is oftentimes we are used to conspiracy theories to explain things, but because we don't have the facts, really, I don't want to speculate on that issue.
Michael Pregent, how's Joe Biden done today?
Well, he's assured Turkey that they have an ally in the United States. He wants to keep Turkey in NATO, of course. He said the right things. He praised the successes of the YPG forces in northern Syria and also recognized Turkey's concern about PKK-led forces in Syria. But, you know, his response to the Fetullah Gulen issue is interesting because he's taking that out of the political. And if he puts it in the courts, Gulen is not going to be extradited. The only way Gulen will be extradited from the United States is if it is a political decision made by President Obama. So it's interesting that he said this won't be a political decision, it'll be left to the courts. So I think that's a tell.
But it will be left to the courts.
That's an indicator.
It will be left to the courts. President Obama can't just order his extradition.
Well, we've seen a lot of things that President Obama's not supposed to be able to do that he has done here. I'm just telling you, if it becomes political pressure weighs in. A lot of Americans aren't following this, so it wouldn't necessarily be a lot of protest here if that happened. But the issue is, what happens to Gulen if he's extradited? Will he get a fair trial? What happens? I mean, you look at Erdogan is taking advantage of the situation to basically go after all opponents, not just Gulen list opponents. The threat of any association with a Gulen member is cause to be detained by this government, from journalists to academia to people in the military to children. I mean, if they're not being treated fairly now, if these democratic institutions are being what's the word I'm looking for, paused or put on the shelf for now while Erdogan uses martial law to go after political opponents, what's going to happen to Fetullah Gulen if he goes back to Turkey? And that's the biggest question Americans should have is, will he get a fair trial?
Emre Demir, Joe Biden telling President Erdogan those involved in the Turkish coup were terrorists. What do you think of the words you heard him speak earlier?
Well, I agree on them. Those who participated in the coup are terrorists. I consider this coup attempt as a terrorist attack. It wasn't quite like a coup, but to come with about this Gulen extradition thing, the problem is that, of course, the vast majority of Turkish people, including Kemalists or secular people, including pro-AKP people, believes that Gulen is behind this coup. I mean, this is the popular sentiment, but we know that media is controlled, and there every part of the society has their motives, and we need we need evidence. The suspicion. I mean, we are talking about the Turkish army, a secular army, and we don't know their influence. The numbers are still uncertain, and their complicity unsolved. For example, to look at yesterday, it was the first formal extradition request coming from Ankara to the United States, and all the evidence given by Ankara to the U.S. were not related to coup attempt. It was related to other charges. We don't know the context. But
let me ask Talha Kose about that, because we had the State Department spokesperson on Tuesday say that we got an extradition request, but it was nothing regarding that last month's coup attempt. Today, the Justice Minister in Turkey saying, they're going to present more evidence in 2 weeks' time. Why didn't they do so earlier?
I think this is a very complicated issue, and they have sent 8 or 9 boxes of documents about this, issue. And the testaments, confessions of the generals and the people who are involved in the civilian dimension of this coup effort is also coming. So it is still early in Turkish case. The courts has not given any clear decision about this issue. But if we trace back the evidence so far, I think there are enough evidence to confirm that this was organized by Gulen-affiliated networks. So yes, it may be going in the direction.
Emre Demir?
Well, that's what I'm telling you. There's not enough evidence that indicates that Gulen movement as a group, actually we are assisting in a collective punishment against all the members of the Gulen movement, including civilians, including teachers, etc. And we don't know yet if it's really a coup attempt organized by Gulen himself or Gulenist military personnel. And we know that since 3 years, Gulen has become a convenient scapegoat for all the political mistakes committed by AKP, including, for example, the downing of the Russian jets. Erdogan formally accused Gulen for downing the Russian jets. So, I mean, this is a political issue, and and this time accusations are serious, and we really need solid evidence. It doesn't mean that you have to find a telephone call from Gulen, etc. You have to show that all these generals have ties with this Gulenist movement. So we don't have yet. And in Turkey, there's this popular sentiment, but of course it is normal. We've lived through a shock. It was a national shock. Everybody's angry still right now. We are still in shock, and we pointed out at a scapegoat, and it's convenient also for the opposition parties. I mean, for Kemalists, for secular people, it is easy to blame a mysterious secret group rather than the Kemalist military. It's the national pride, and instead of accusing the army all itself, you can accuse a cleric who is already, became a scapegoat of the regime. So makes sense, but this time this is serious. I mean, we really need serious evidence, it has been 1 month, and it is important, and it is also important that we still don't know who was the leader of this military coup. I mean, who was the military leader? Who were the political backings of this coup? I mean, we don't know the council yet. The council who organized we don't know the members of the council who organized the coup. I mean, there are still open questions, simple questions that had yet never been answered yet. It's a serious issue, and I think we have to wait more.
Hisyar Uzoy, who is behind last month's coup?
Not us, I think, not the HDP. I mean, it is a coalition. It is a coalition of different sources, and it seems actually my friend who just talked, he said that we really don't have a lot of evidence. I mean, there is a lot of manipulation, media manipulation, but it seems that some people close to the Fetullah Gulen community, our impression is they were somehow involved. But to what extent, we don't know because we don't have the facts. But in addition to those, it's not simply a Gulen movement thing here, because when you look at the people who are in prison now, the generals who are in prison, there are a lot of Kemalist people, independent people, those commanders who just don't like Erdogan. It was a coalition. In fact, it was a bigger coalition there. But the government was smart by manipulating the issue, saying that this is simply a Fetullah Gulen thing. So that way they were able to somehow also repress the initiative. The intervention, because it could have been different if people had thought that the army, not simply the Gulen-related people, but the army in general, I mean, is involved in this attempt. It could have been different, but there is a lot of media manipulation, and probably we will never learn the basic facts. But if you ask us, the HDP, I mean, who was behind this whole coup attempt, we will even say that Erdogan himself was a part of this whole process.
How so?
Why he was how so? Let me explain. I mean, the coup didn't just start on July 15 and contained on July 16, 2016. When Erdogan suspended the peace process, he transferred the Kurdish issue to the army, to the military. And over the last summer, over the last year, those people who are now in prison with the charges of organizing the coup attempt, those people were leading the repression campaign in Kurdish provinces, destroying whole towns, killing civilian people, exposing their bodies. We do think that that was a part of the coup process. So the army flexed its muscles in Kurdish provinces and returned to Ankara to claim politics. And when the army was killing civilian Kurds, destroying their towns, Mr. President Erdogan and Davutoglu, they were very much supportive of them, actually. So it's very interesting that all the chief commanders fighting in the Kurdish region, destroying Kurdish towns, they happen to be the architects, the main architects of the coup attempt. So that is the link. So the coup process started a year ago, and it culminated into this attack on the parliament and in Ankara, in Istanbul. But we need to have a processual understanding of the coup.
So Hissiyar Ozoy, let me ask you, Joe Biden apologizing personally to Erdogan for not coming to Turkey sooner after the coup. What do you think of the tone the U.S. Vice President has struck on this visit?
Yeah, there is a lot of disappointment on the part of the government and Erdogan himself, and he was very explicitly stating his criticism, saying that the Western countries, they left us alone when fighting the coup. And Mr. Biden was here to somehow respond to those feelings and ideas of Mr. Erdogan in particular. Ultimately, Turkey is a NATO ally, and they are working with Turkey on several grounds. And he came here to somehow repair some of the broken relationships. I don't know to what extent he was successful, but the government and the AKP, the president, was able to turn this into a PR thing, a nice public relations event. But at the same time, we know there are several differences, stark differences between the U.S. and Turkey's policies in Syria as well as the Middle East.
Let me bring in Michael Prejin on that. At the end of the day, after Joe Biden has left Turkey, the U.S., Turkey, they're both NATO allies and partners. When push comes to shove, will they always be partners? Despite this warming of ties we've seen with the likes of Russia and Iran, will Turkey in the end always side with the United States?
Well, you have to look at what Turkey's done in the last 30 days, what Erdogan's done. I mean, he's gone to Moscow. He just allowed Russian fighters to use the same base that the United States is using in Turkey at Incirlik to conduct these attacks. So,
but that can be seen as leveraging.
Oh yeah, it's leverage. That's exactly what I'm saying. I mean, Erdogan will leverage the relationship with the United States and NATO, but he's also leveraging that position with Putin. Erdogan's in an advantageous position. He's able to use the coup attempt to go after political opponents, a large coalition of political opponents, and he's able to actually ensure that the Kurdish forces don't have too much success in northern Syria by conducting military operations under the guise of fighting ISIS. So he's in an advantageous position, and he has an acquiescent United States administration that is making him look very good this week.
Talha Kose, at the end of the day, the U.S. and Turkey will always have this NATO bond.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, Turkish-American relations are more than just what's happening in Syria. They need each other in Balkans, in the Caucasus, Black Sea region. But unfortunately, in the last 2 years, the relations have been poisoned because of their disagreement on Syria. And also, this coup was another element. I think it may turn into better relations. What Turkey trying to do is, at this moment, is to diversify its relationship, because whenever Turkey needed the West's help, Turkey feels that Turkey is abandoned by the West. So Turkey may need other actors, other partners in times of these kind of crises. It doesn't necessarily mean that the alliance will end or Turkey will find another, other group of allies. So I think we have to make clear that diversifying relationship does not necessarily mean that Turkey is switching to another system of alliance.
Hissiyar Ozoy, how far can Turkey pivot away from the U.S. towards Russia?
Yeah, I don't think they can do that much in that regard. I think Turkey is somehow, in a way, blackmailing the way they use the refugee crisis to somehow negotiate with the European Union. And the West, the United States, as well as the European Union, they know the limits of Turkey in that regard, and I don't think they take that very much seriously. The other thing is, just to correct a factual mistake, Russia is not using the Incirlik base, as far as I know. And in fact, the Incirlik base is a NATO base, and Russia is not a member of the NATO, so they can't use it. In fact, the deputy, Vice Prime Minister, right? He said that actually Russia can never use the NATO base, the Incirlik base, just to correct that one. So yes, Turkey is trying to make new alliances in the Middle East. They are trying to repair their relations with Russia, with Israel, with Assad too, I should say, as well as with Egypt, because their Syrian policy was bankrupt, total bankruptcy there. So now they are trying to reposition themselves. But we do think that all these alliances outside, with Russia, with Israel, with Assad, with even Egypt, is to contain what they perceive as the Kurdish threat. In fact, we do think that the attack on Jarablus today, this is not an operation to rescue the town of Jarablus from the ISIS. We do think that it is an operation to rescue the ISIS from Kurdish forces, who just last week captured the town of Manbij and defeated ISIS. So, I don't agree that, I mean, Turkey doesn't equate ISIS with the Kurdish forces there. In fact, there is a hierarchy there. Turkey has always preferred ISIS over PYD or Kurdish forces there, because for them the main national security issue is the Kurdish advances, particularly in the area between Kobani and Afrin. And in fact, they are saying it. They are very clearly saying it. They are not shying away from admitting this. This is not an operation against the ISIS. It is an operation to prevent the Kurds from capturing the town of Jarablus. So in that sense, Turkey's Syrian policy is decisively anti-Kurdish. In that sense, there is no change in Turkey's Syrian policy. From the very beginning, there were two.
Hisiar, sorry, we're going to unfortunately have to leave it there because we're running out of time. But I want to thank you so much for joining us from Ankara. I want to thank Talha Kose in Istanbul, Michael Pregent in Washington, Emre Demir. Stay with us. Our Media Watch segment is next. And we say hello to James Creedon.
Hi, François.
We heard our panelists say how a lot of conspiracy theories these days in Turkey. It was not an easy mission for Joe Biden.
Certainly it wasn't, François. In fact, Fetullah Gulen, who is accused of having mounted the coup from within the US by many members of the Turkish cabinet, in fact, including the justice minister, who has suggested in the past that there might be CIA involvement. This was the context of the visit by the American vice president. You can see here on Twitter some of the protest signs that were held aloft in the streets of Ankara, that in approximative English: what if Bin Laden would be in Turkey and we wouldn't give him to you after 9/11? So they're equating Fetullah Gulen with Osama bin Laden. And you can see other images as well there showing the amount of people who were holding up protest signs as the cortege passed by. Now, of course, Joe Biden was very clear on his message. The US has no interest in protecting anyone harming an ally, but legal standards must be met. In other words, there has to be a judicial process for Fetullah Gulen's hypothetical extradition. Biden also said, this being relayed by the Turkish state broadcaster TRT, US had no prior knowledge of the coup attempt in Turkey. So the very fact that he has to say that publicly shows the extent to which there are very different versions of events, and certainly in Turkish public opinion, I think a lot of suspicion that there was US involvement. Look at this tweet by Sybil Edmonds trying to figure out how Joe Biden and others will how the US will manage this extradition request. Biden, Turkey visit, a save face operation, essentially. Long extradition process for Gulen until Gulen dies. That's perhaps one strategy that is being suggested online. I'll move on, François, to images that are circulating on social media as well of the Turkish offensive, an unprecedented operation to free ISIS-held Syrian towns. As
Yeah, because it's only the second time since the Syria conflict that we've seen Turkish tanks on Syrian soil.
Right, and indeed, it's exposing the very complicated chessboard, certainly in terms of the U.S. position vis-a-vis the Turkish position, with the U.S. supporting Turkey, but also rebel groups opposed by Turkey, and many are pointing that out on social media as well. For example, there is one particular group, Nur ad-Din Zenki, which has in the past decapitated a child in quite a well-publicized incident in Aleppo, which is participating in this battle against the Islamic State organization, allied with Turkey. So you have jihadist groups that Turkey is allying with in opposition, in common opposition to the Islamic State organization. Hurriyet Daily News, which has, of course, has been targeted by the purge, you could say, post-coup, but they're still online for now. What if Turkey enters Syria? They're pointing out here in this article as well just how complicated it is indeed for the US. There was one tweet, I'll just finish with this. The USA in Syria pointing out what a complicated... They're talking about a satirical show, Santa Barbara, which was a bit of a skit on Santa Barbara. I've just left Mark for Andrew, and I also love Peter and Julian and Robert and Stephen. In other words, it's quite the complicated dance, if you like, in terms of who is allied with who and who is opposing who. And yeah,
and your enemies are not necessarily your friends.
Right.
James Creed.
I don't understand it, to be honest. I'll be honest.
Many thanks. I want to thank our panelists once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.